if struck by a chill or a vision of ancient grace. And he gazed with a stare at my nut-brown hair till the blood rushed to his face. From Bantry Bay up to Derry Quay, and from Galway to Dublin town, no lad I've seen has a look so keen as I saw here in County Down. As he tripped o'er his feet, for a lad so bold, he was knocked from his hold by a girl that he chanced to meet. From Bantry Bay up to Derry Quay, and from Galway to Dublin town, no lad I've met hasn't a name to set against the star of the County Down. His fingers on the door. If he's half the wit as he's got the grit, I might like him a wee bit more. From Bantry Bay up to Derry Quay, and from Galway to Dublin town, ne'er a lad I've sought has a heart so caught by the star of the County Down. From the roofs, I stand on the ridgeline, breathing the proof. Sky like a pale bowl, frost in my hair, name on my tongue tip, thin in the air. I call across the pines, he's in the powder turning and gone. Wind takes the branches, braids them in song. Far in the darkness, something replies, echo or answer, tears in my eyes. Ooh, where are you now? I won't fall silent. Call across the pines, if you're lost, then follow the sound. Let it guide you through the night. Come home here. Come home.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another beautiful night in the tavern. It is so good to see you all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Grab your seats and settle in. It is time for stories. Let's see who all we've got in. We've got Sir Chatty Matty, we've got the Frostbeard, we've got Molly Sue, we've got Old Bear, we've got Erin, we've got Tyson, we have Rain, we have Molly Sue. I think that's all of the folk who are in chat over on the Twitch portal. Welcome in, friends. Fallen Crow, hello, good to see you. Jacob, welcome. First indeed, welcome in. The Capitan is in as well. Hello, 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 my friends. It's so good to see you all. Grab your seats, settle in. Jody, hello. Thank you kindly for the drink. Cheers. First on Facebook, anyway, yeah. First through your particular portal. That is a fair claim of first, Jacob. All right, my friends. So just as a reminder, everyone, tonight is Thursday, and that means it is our adult storytime night, and we are reading from Prince of the Blood. Now, typically, we avoid explicit themes, so there's not anything that's going to be overly shocking, but the adult storytime night does have a book that is more intended for adults, so it may have a little bit of dread, a little bit of suspense, a little bit more swearing perhaps, and sometimes adult imagery or people looking at butts, which happened in the previous chapter. I was not prepared for. Yes, I'm not even kidding. That was a thing that happened. He was thinking about how wonderful someone's posterior was. Which who among us have not had that thought? Right? Who among us have not had that thought? More or less, Matty, more or less. Not in so crass a term, but more or less. Petra, hello, Castle High. How are things in the tavern? I hope you and the lady are doing well. We're doing quite well. We're in the midst of deep cleaning the tavern this week. So we are... it's chaos at the moment. But nothing too dreadfully terrible. Can't blame them. No, you can't blame them. Butts are good. Most everyone has one. Most everyone does have one, and they usually are pretty good. See, this is what I mean by adult themes to the conversation. We're talking about the desirability of gluteus maximus, and we are only 11 minutes in. Don't make sure your kids are all put away before they join this conversation. Deep cleaning the tavern is important. Yes. Because we're finding areas where Milo had gone to hide when he was a kitten before he learned to use the litter box. And so I'm cleaning up everything. Everything is getting cleaned. And again, for the first time in a very long time, the lady in I's room is getting some attention. Because again, we only ever go back there to sleep. All the rest of the time we spend working. And so a lot of the leftover storytime props, a lot of the clothing and extra cloth, it all just kind of ends up piled in our bedroom. And the dog and both the cats also sleep in there. So it's just gotten to the point where the whole house, the whole tavern needed a good deep cleaning, and we're about halfway done. We're about halfway done. So no complaints, as it'll be nice to have it all nice and clean. I have plans to deep clean next week, and I'm so ready to chuck so much stuff into the trash. I am shocked at how much stuff we are actually throwing away. I didn't realize how much stuff we had that we didn't really need anymore. Because it just kind of, it sits on a shelf, sits in a pile, sits in a drawer, and then you kind of forget about it. I will probably come as a surprise to everybody, but I didn't cause myself harm shifting firewood during the... That is a surprise to everyone, and we're all glad to hear it. Clifford, hello, welcome in. Good to see you, my friend. Hannah, hello. I've been away too long. It's good to be back. It has been too long. I'm glad you made your way back to your seat. We've been deep cleaning as well in preparation for the oldest daughter's high school graduation. Well, congratulations to your eldest. Well done. That's quite an accomplishment. You'll definitely feel better once it's done and over. Yes. I actually don't really mind cleaning if it's productive. And this time it's very productive and needed. The lady and I work so much that it's been one of those things sort of just fell by the wayside, and it's needed attention for a while. And I've just decided this week is my week to get a lot of things done, so the lady and I are putting in the time and work and get it all done. Our room is also a catch-all. It drives me nuts. Keeps the icky pests out. That's true. I actually have to spray for pests tomorrow. That's on my agenda for tomorrow. I needed to do it last week and didn't get to it. But pests gonna be done tomorrow. I have a severe lack of butt. Well, it's common amongst our genealogy, Bear. Gotta work hard to get a posterior when you are of Western or Northern European descent. I hope I'm not late. No, you're not late, Clifford. We've just begun. I am very late. Get her done, that's right. As Larry the Cable Guy would say, Rain. Get her done. I don't know if I did his voice right. I tried. We have made 5 trips to the dump. You're right about not knowing how much junk we have. It's crazy. Like when you live a very busy life and you don't like actively triage your home throughout the day, it is crazy how much stuff just gets piled up. It's crazy. I have a bony butt. Well, most of us do, Matty. Most of us have more. Bone is the root of butt. Bone is it's the very foundation of the butt. You're supposed to build something on top of it, though. Milo, hello, love. Good to see you. I hope you're feeling well. I had a couple of scary but also weirdly happy weeks. I shared in the Discord all that had happened. I'll go in and check. And again, I apologize, everybody. When I get very busy, I don't check my messages because I like to give all of the messages, comments that I get a lot of attention. I like to make sure that I sit down, I'm deliberate with how I respond to them. And sometimes, if I know I'm not going to have time to do it, I just won't do it. And sometimes I'll go 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks and not respond to messages because I have so much to do. So if ever you send me a message or there's something in the Discord I didn't see, you can tag me if it's something you really want to make sure that I see. You can tag or message Una or one of the barkeeps who has my contact information, and they'll get in touch with me, let me know that there's something I need to address. So and again, I apologize that it's that way. When I am deep in work, I get distracted very easily. So I apologize for that. I usually declutter my clothes. I give them to a thrift shop. Yes, we'll have quite a bit of clothing going to donation, as well as some old electronics and a couple of other things. So we'll have a lot of stuff going out. All right, my friends. I think I've given everybody sufficient time to trickle in. So what we're going to do is we're going to do our ad run over on Twitch, so that our Twitch friends who don't have subs or Twitch Turbo will not get ads in the middle of story time. And then as soon as that's done, we're gonna start. All right, let's go ahead and get her running. So if you're new and you've never been on Twitch before, Twitch makes us run ads. Otherwise, they will get you stuck in an ad as soon as you start watching. And they make us run about 3 minutes of them every hour, so that we can get an hour straight without them. It's not fun, but it does give the tavern a little bit of revenue. Not much, but they would make us run them even if they weren't giving us something anyhow. So I appreciate those of you willing to sit through them. We will be back in 3 minutes, and we will begin Prince of the Blood. And if I remember right, there was some rather intense things about to happen, as somebody discovered that the princes were on Stardock, and went to inform someone who wanted them dead. So we'll see what happens. We'll be right back. I need to get out and about, so tomorrow I'm going to go for a ride on my electric scooter. You know, electric scooters and electric bicycles are so surprisingly fun to ride. I've always been a petrol head. I've always been a gas guy. I love motorcycles. I love cars. I especially love muscle cars. And it baffles me how much fun electric scooters are to ride. Like, you wouldn't think that a little electric scooter would be something that would be fun to ride, but they're a gas. I remember back when they first started putting them around cities. My brother and I were still working events, and we would rent the Lyft or Lime scooters, and we would go between venues. We would go between all of the other things, and I always had good fun. My Jessica, hello, good to see you, love. Welcome in. My dream car is a 1967 Shelby GT Mustang. What's your dream car? Oh boy. Well, I think a lot of folk have the 1967 Shelby GT because it's a classic. It's Eleanor, right? It's the unicorn. Joker, how's it going, bud? Welcome in. If I had to say, I would say a 1971 Challenger, perhaps. Milu, thank you for the resub. Was that 18 months? What a legend. My dream is to have a motorcycle one day. I used to want to have a motorcycle, and then too many of my friends have died on them now, and I've given up that dream. because I don't want to abandon my family for a motorcycle. My brother and I just had a very dear friend a few months ago uh, get hit in a roundabout. And don't get me wrong, I love motorcycles. I just would never drive one in a city. It's just people. It's not even like your skill that's the problem. It's that people don't pay attention and they drive very selfishly. And if you're not perfect with how you pay attention on the road, somebody's gonna hit you. But I like to answer your question, Safe Titan. I like the 1971 Dodge Challenger. I like the 1972 Chevy Cheyenne. But the car that I would really like if I ever had the money to get one, uh, a Rolls Royce Ghost or Phantom are like the nicest cars you've ever driven in. They have that legendary old like inline 8 or inline 6. My book is coming along and handy. Good, Joker. I'm glad to hear it. I can't wait to see it done. Uh, the what was the other one? Rolls Royce has like, but I can't fit in the Ghost. The Rolls Royce Ghost is a beautiful car. I can fit the Phantom, but there's a bigger SUV version of the Rolls Royce that if I ever had money, the one expensive thing I would buy myself that didn't have to do with the tavern would be one of those because they're just such beautiful cars. The technology and the engine is so gorgeous. All beautiful classics. Just getting into them would be a dream. Yeah, I used to own a 1972 Chevy Cheyenne and it got stolen. My father left me a 72 Chevy Cheyenne when he died. Didn't run. It was an old beat up piece of junk that he drove in the 70s. But yeah, I was sad. It got stolen along with his mother's '68 Oldsmobile and a 1972 Dodge Charger. Sadly, I'm too heavy to ride an electric scooter. Yeah, I'm too heavy to ride most of them too. I broke a lift scooter back in the day. I went off a curb with it and it snapped. Don't tell Lyft that I broke one of their scooters though. I'm looking into getting a Grom. I don't need a full-size street bike. Yeah, fair enough. I bought down an electric scooter that looks like a gas-powered one. It has 2 seats, too, so it's cool. Yeah, I love those little electric scooters. They're just so zippy and so fun to ride. Thank you, Frost. I appreciate you. Give me a tank to drive. Tanks are fun to drive if... I don't know. I think some of our military friends have probably driven tanks. I've driven 2 tanks in my life. One was a smaller one, and one was an Abrams a buddy of mine had out in Texas, and we got to drive it around on a big tank range. Dan's is a Daymark. I don't know the brand, but I'll give it a look, Milu. Sword Talk, hello, good to see you. Welcome in. I've been to a museum of tanks. It's a gas station. that's that's very funny, Kayla. The following Thursday, okay, it's a very long book. I'm having such fun writing it. The following Thursday on the 28th, I'm going to a barricade. Ooh, fun. I'm an 88M in the army. I drive all the big truck vehicles. Oh, see, there you go. It's a real gas stop here. Oh, really? That's interesting, Kayla. I thought you were joking. I thought you were making a joke about how gas stations have gas tanks. I thought you were being punny with me. Tanks are clunky. Any military vehicle is super clunky. It's true. Military trucks especially have like virtually no comfort suspension at all. They'll drive over anything, but if you hit anything too hard, your head's going through the roof. But we drove in Abrams, and you're right, they're not comfortable to drive, but an Abrams will drive over just about anything. The suspension is horrible and the AC never works. Well, yeah, I think that's indicative of most things governmental, right, Titan? I can think of a few times when a tank would have been useful. Yeah, there's a few. There was a 1956 armored personnel carrier for sale for $20,000 the other day. I mean, you gotta ask yourself. Rabbits and my wedding cars were a 1951 MKV Jaguar. One was a convertible and the other was a sedan. Ah, that's gorgeous. A friend of mine, who we call Red, she's been a dear friend of mine for a very long time. When she got married, the whole procession was done in classic cars, and everybody in the party wore like 1970s chocolate shop attire and uh, Converse shoes. So it was a really neat sort of eclectic wedding. All right, my friends, I have waffled you enough. Let's go ahead and get in to story time tonight. A family friend had a Vietnam-era deuce and a half as a feed truck. It did the job, but it beat the snot out of you, the process. Yeah, what you'll find is that the government does nothing well, efficiently, or under budget. But it will get it done. Good evening to you. I hope you all is well with you. I have a dreadful dang cold. About to do me in. I was in the shower trying to get in here. Well, I'm glad you dropped by, Marshall. We'll start story time. Tonight is adult story time night, so we don't get too adult, but the stories do tend to be a little bit more intense on Thursday. But you should still be able to find yourself a nice, relaxing tempo to join us. Honestly, I'm good. They use it for live demos sometimes. Oh, interesting. That's neat. All right, my friends, grab your seats, settle in. If you are on the YouTube or the Facebook portal, just a reminder, you will be anywhere from 15 to 60 seconds behind everyone else. It's just a delay thing that happens. If you want to be with the main conversation, you can go over to the Twitch portal. But if not, it doesn't bother me any. If I miss something that you say, you can feel free to say it again, and I will have no qualms responding to you. You don't have to worry about repeating yourself. I don't ignore messages. If you say something stupid that needs to be addressed, I don't ignore it. I will address it. And if you just have a question that needs addressing, I will get to it if I see it. All right. Let us begin, my friends. Oh, Mark 5. I should have known that. My father had a Lincoln Continental Mark 5, and it had the same abbreviation. I should have known that, Bear. That's on me. Okay, let us begin, my friends. When we last left off, Squire James, no longer Squire James, Baron James, was getting married to Gamina, the daughter of the magician Pug. During the wedding, two rapscallions, if you will, two disreputable characters, saw that these two young boys were likely the princes, and sent word to someone who apparently very much would like to see them dead. And this is where we are now. Chapter 5. Southward. The guards laughed. James turned to see the cause of their mirth and saw the two princes approaching. Erlond was wearing an improbable-looking coat of heavy chain, weighing at least 5 times what his usual leather armor weighed. A bright red cloak was tossed rakishly over his shoulders. But the laughter was primarily directed at his brother, who wore a robe which covered him from head to toe. It was a repulsive shade of purple with arcane symbols sewn in gold thread around the hood and sleeves. No doubt once the stunning centerpiece of some magician's wardrobe, it had seen better days. An odd-looking wooden staff with a milky white glass ball mounted atop it hung in the place of his usual sword at his side. On Colgan, or one of the Keshian magicians, the robe would have seemed appropriate. On Boric, the effect was entirely comic. Locklear joined in the laughter as he came to James's side. What are they made up for? James sighed. I've no idea. To the princes he said, What's this thing? Erlon grinned. We found a game of poker, and here they call it poker, or poker, and here they call it poker. Our luck was uneven. James shrugged, absently wondering how long Gamina would keep him waiting. His bride was in her quarters, gathering the last of what she could bring with her to Kesh. The rest of her belongings would be sent to the palace in Krondor in anticipation of her return after the Empress's birthday jubilee. Boric said, I lost my own cloak to a bargeman, and my sword to a fellow who most likely sold it for a bottle of wine. But then I found a magician who believed a little too much in luck and not enough in good card sense. Look at this. James cast a glance at the elder of the twins and saw him holding out an odd-looking staff. Oh, all right. What is it? Boric took the staff out of its sheath and gave it to James to examine. It's a magic device. The crystal glows when it gets dark, so you don't need to bother with lamps or torches. We saw it work last night. It's quite good. James nodded as if to say, that was nice. What else does it do? Nothing, except for it's a rather nice-looking walking stick, I think, answered Erlon to his brother. He added, but I'd wager you'll wish you had your sword back if someone comes running at you with the bloody great falchion in hand. I expect, agreed Locklear. Well, I'll buy another sword when we reach civilization, said Boric. James sighed. And some new clothing. Those outfits look absurd. Locklear laughed. You want to say absurd? To Boric he said, show him the boots. Grinning, Boric pulled up the hem of his robe, and James shook his head in astonishment. Boric wore boots of red leather rising to mid-calf, each adorned with a yellow eagle. I want these as well. I think the previous owner was pleased to see you losing a hand, to see the losing hand when those were wagered, James said. You look like you're about to open a travelling carnival. Hard those, if you please. The colours are beyond belief, he added, indicating the clash between the red and yellow boots and the purple robe. To Erlon, he added, and you look like you're about to invade Great Kesh single-handed. I haven't seen chain like that since the Battle of Sethenon. Locklear, who, like James, wore a simple tunic and a leather vest, said, You're going to love that chain when we reach the edge of the desert. Erlon's retort was interrupted by the appearance of Gamina and her parents. Pug held Katala's arm, and it was now clear to James that she was indeed ill. Whether it was due to the demands of her daughter's wedding or the day before, or her realization that now her children no longer needed her and the illness was asserting itself, James could not know. But it was clear to anyone with eyes that Katala's life was numbered, now in weeks at most. They came to where James waited, and Katala spoke to her son-in-law in quiet tones. This is goodbye, James. James could only nod. Katala's people were warriors and proud and always direct. So Pug had impressed on him, and so she behaved. You will be missed, he added at last. And I will miss all of you. She placed her hand on his chest gently, and he could feel the frail fingers touch him lightly over his heart. We only pass from view. We live here as long as we are remembered. James lowered his head and kissed her lightly upon the cheek, a gesture of both affection and respect. Always remember, he said. She returned his kiss and then turned away to say goodbye to her daughter. Pug motioned James to walk with him a short distance away. When they were both out of earshot of the others, he said, "Katala returns to her homeworld tonight, James. There is no reason any longer to delay any longer. If we linger, she might not have the strength to make the journey from the site of the rift on Kelawon to the Thuriel border. I have friends who will help, but it'll still be an arduous trip for someone in her condition to make alone." James' eyebrows rose in surprise. "You're not travelling with her?" Pug shook his head. "I must be about other business," James sighed. "Will we see you?" He had been about to say soon, but something in Pug's expression caused him to let the sentence fall off. Pug glanced over his shoulder at his wife and daughter, who stood holding hands silently. Both Pug and James knew they were speaking with their minds. "Probably not. I suspect if I come this way again, few will welcome the sight of me, for I imagine it will herald only the most dreadful circumstances, perhaps something akin to the terrors we faced at Sethanon." James was quiet for a moment. He had been only a boy when the armies of the Moridel and the Brotherhood of the Dark Path marched under the banner of their false prophet, Marmandamis. But that time was forever etched in the stark relief in his memory. He still recalled the battle of Armangar and Sethanon in detail and could vividly recall the sight of the sky torn open by the return of the Dragon Lords, and the nearly catastrophic end of life their return heralded. The seemingly miraculous victory over them, directed by Pug, Tomas of Elvendar, Macross the Back, and Arutha, was still something he could not fully comprehend. Finally, James said, "That would be when you were needed most, though." Pug shrugged, as if to say that wasn't necessarily true. "In any event, I am now dependent upon others to carry forth the work begun under my guidance. You must help." "What can I do?" With a faint smile, Pug said, "The first should be no issue between us. Love my daughter and care for her." James smiled. "No more could any man do." "Keep an eye on her brother." "Well, he is a competent officer, Pug. He needs little looking after. I expect he will be captain of Arutha's guard in a few years." Pug shrugged again, showing only a small hint of his disappointment that his son was not here to follow after him. Whatever difficulty he had passed between Pug and his son was not discussed. "Secondly, I need your voice of support of Stardock's autonomy." "Agreed. And remember what I told you. When you need to speak on my behalf, the secret I shared with you." James tried to find humour in the sad departure, but could only say, "As you wish. I will remember. Though standing upon an island where men work spells of great art, every day makes me wonder at what nonsense I'm to remember." Pug patted his arm as he moved to return to his wife and daughter. "No nonsense. Never fall into the trap of judging that which you don't understand as nonsense. That error can destroy you." James followed after, and then they were leaving. As they walked to where 3 large barges waited to ferry them across the lake, James glanced over at the princes. Boric and Erlon stood chatting about the coming trip, obviously relieved to be away from what they judged unwelcome tranquility, and for a brief moment James wondered if they might not all regret having no more such tranquility. "Songbird, hello, good lord. So many gifts. Hang on. Kayla, thank you for the rose. Psychotic Ducky, thank you for the heart me. Songbird, thank you for the heart me that got popular. The soccer, the finger hearts, the heart puff, the live, the rose, the cool. The shared hope, the TikTok, the you're awesome, the laughing taco, the love you so much, the wink wink, and the that's all. Thank you kindly for all the gifts. I appreciate you. And welcome in, Colt. Good to see you over the TikTok portal. Jaeger, hello, my son. Good to see you. I can't see any of the other things. Okay, we're good there. Erin, good night, love. Have a good night. Rest well. Make sure you take care of yourself. Hydrate properly. Oh. When you're on a roll, yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Well, raise a glass to you. The tips of the tavern people are deeply appreciated. Good night, Erin. Rest well. All right. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't missed too much. I appreciate you all being patient while my head is down. I need to get out and about tomorrow. Oh, I already read that one. And make sure that I'm keeping up with everybody on all the different portals. Okay, we are good. Let us continue, friends. Light gusts blew stinging sun, and the twins reined in their horses. Gamina studied the horizon and spoke loudly enough for all to hear.
I don't think the storm is serious. The sky looks wrong, but it may be bothersome.
They rode at the edge of the Yolpur, along the road to Narayab, the northernmost city of consequence in the empire, and the rough plateau landscape was almost as desolate as the desert itself, with few trees and bushes, and most of those thickly bunched along the banks of a few small streams that coursed down and out of the hills below the mountains, called the Pillars of the Stars by the Keshians. James motioned towards the far end of the road where it crested a distant hill, as a company of riders slowly made their way towards them. "Keshian border guards!" he shouted over the rising wind. "Sergeant, time to display the cordons." The sergeant of the company motioned two guards forward, and they quickly broke segments of wood standards out of their saddlebags. Hastily screwing the segments together, they raised two small standards just as the Keshian riders breasted the hill upon which James and his companions waited. Two royal Krondorian house flags, each with a different cadence mark overlaid, Boric and Erlon's royal standards, now greeted the suspicious eye of the advancing Keshian leader. A dark-skinned man, his nappy beard matted with grey dust, motioned to his own company to halt. They were a rough-looking band. Each man had a bow slung over his saddle horn, as well as a round hide shield and a metal bosk. Each rider wore a curved scimitar at his belt and carried a light lance. All wore heavy trousers tucked into high boots, white linen shirts and leather vests, and metal helms with long linen coverings hanging over their necks. Boric motioned to Erlon. "Clever, isn't it? They keep the sun off their necks and can hook the clothes over their face to keep the wind out if it gets vicious." Erlon simply let a heavy breath out and said nothing. He was feeling the heat in the heavy chainmail coat. The leader of the Keshian patrol kicked his horse and trotted forward, pulling up before James. He examined the ragged-looking company, unconvinced that such a dirty, tired-looking band of travellers would indeed be the royal caravan from the Isles. At last, he saluted no one in particular, a lazy gesture of bringing his right hand to his head, palm out, then let his hand fall onto his horse's neck. "Welcome, my lords and lady." James moved forward. "I am James, Earl of Crondor, and I have the honour of presenting their royal highnesses, Princes Boric and Erlond." The two princes inclined their heads slightly, and the Keshian patrol leader bowed his head slightly in return. I am Sergeant Ras Al Fali, my lord. And what conspires to bring you amongst us, your august company, to such a miserable place? We are travelling to the city of Kesh for the Empress's Jubilee. The sergeant shrugged, indicating that the ways of the gods were not for mortals to understand, nor the ways of nobility clearly sensible to common soldiers. I would have thought that nobles such as yourselves would have been travelling in a more stately company. As the wind increased and the horses began to stamp and shy, James raised his voice over the noise. It seemed better to move quickly and with stealth than slowly, Sergeant. The storm rises. May we continue? The captain signed to his own men forward as he said, Of course, my lord. I and my men are travelling to the end of the 12 chairs to wait out the storm in comfort. I suggest you join us. Is it dangerous? The sergeant glanced at the horizon as Gamina heard and said, Who can say? The dust storm that rises in Yolapur may blow quickly or long. If I was a betting man, I would wager this one will be little more than an inconvenience. Still, I would rather be inconveniently inside. We'll continue, said James. We stayed longer at our last rest than planned, and it wouldn't do to arrive late to the Jubilee. The sergeant shrugged, clearly not caring one way or the other. Insults to the Empress, blessings be upon her, are to be strenuously avoided. She is often merciful, but rarely forgiving. May the gods guide your travel, my lords. With a wave, he motioned his patrol to give way to the kingdom party, they resumed their journey. James signaled, and his small band started down a hard-packed dirt that passed for the Imperial Road in this northern frontier. As the road went silent, as they rode past the silent Keshians, Boric nodded to Erlan, who had also been studying the tired, dirty soldiers. Each man looked a seasoned fighter, with not one youthful face in the company. To his brother, Erlan said, They keep their veterans along the borders. Jimmy, overhearing, said loudly enough for the entire company to hear, They have veterans to spare in Kesh. A man who retires their army has spent 20 years or more putting down revolts and fighting civil wars. But they keep but a 10th part of their army near our borders. Boric said, Then why do they fear us? James shook his head. Nations fear their neighbours. That's a big fact of life. Like the three moons in the sky. If your neighbour is bigger than you fear invasion and occupation. If smaller, you fear their envy. So you invade them. So sooner or later, there's war. Erlon laughed. Still, better than having nothing to do. James glanced at Locklear. Both had seen more than their share of war before they were the twins' age. Both disagreed with Erlon's sentiments. Molotov Ferry, that's a wonderful name. Thank you kindly for the rose. Mr. Coco, hello, good evening, good to see you. Welcome in, welcome in. Riders! The soldier pointed to a far horizon, where the wind blew up a dark wall swirling of sand that raced towards the travellers, and within the dusty murk the shape of approaching riders could be seen. Then, if the soldier's warning had been signalled, the riders spread out and galloped their horses. Cabana, get to the rear! James shouted as he drew his sword. The soldiers were but a moment behind in releasing the pack animals and bringing their own weapons to ready. Bandits! cried one as he moved to Boric's side. Instinctively, the prince reached for his sword, finding the odd staff there instead. Cursing fate, he circled his horse away from the attack, moving toward the rear alongside Gamina, who had taken it upon herself to herd the shying pack horses in a circle so that they didn't run away. Seeing that the 4 animals were more than she could manage, Boric leapt from his horse and took 2 in hand. The sounds of steel upon steel caused Boric to pull the horses around, back to the wind, in time to see the first bandits intercepted by his own soldiers. In the fray, he sought out the sight of Erlon, but the milling horses and swirling dust made it impossible. Then a horse screamed and a rider went down, cursing loudly. A clash of sword upon shield and a grunt of effort were followed by a succession of shouts made almost incoherent by the rising shriek of wind. The bandits had timed the raid with perfection, picking the moment when the travelers would be most vulnerable to the onslaught. Almost blinded by the sandstorm, in time it had taken to react and draw weapons, the bandits had already succeeded in throwing the men of the Isles into confusion. I'm about to head to bed, but good night and have a lovely evening. Mr. Coco, it was wonderful to see you. I'm glad that you dropped in. I hope that you rest well and that you rise tomorrow ready to conquer the day. Thank you kindly for coming in, my friend. I want to point something out in here that is very interesting. I love that Feist does this. Feist will take the perspective of his characters and insert them into the way that they talk, which is something not a lot of writers do really well. And here he says, as he moved to Boric's side, instinctively the prince reached for his sword, finding the odd staff there instead. Cursing fate, he circled his horse around from the attack. So, in his head, Boric is cursing fate. But what he really ought to be cursing is his poor decision making. He made a poor decision and got rid of his weapon before a dangerous trip. And he's cursing fate rather than cursing his own lack of foresight. Feist does this a lot in the other direction too, where he'll have characters who are very self-aware, realizing that it's their fault. But he's highlighting how self-centered and selfish the boys are by having Boric, oh damn, fates be damned, for this unavoidable thing that has happened. Where the unavoidable thing is just him not being very bright. Alright, let's continue. But the men of Arutha's garrison were tested veterans, and quickly they regrouped as the first few bandits rode past. To a man they sought sight of Baron Locklear, who shouted orders to those closest to him. Then a tremendous blast and stinging sand and dust hit the company, and it was as if the sun had vanished. In the biting sand, Boric fought to control the horses, terrorized by the sound of wind and the battle and the smell of blood. He could only use his weight to slow their pulling, shouting, "Whoa!" repeatedly, and the pair of war-trained riderless horses heard his shouts and halted their trot away from the battle. But the pack animals were ready to bolt. Boric was suddenly pulled off balance and released his grip on the lead ropes. When he hit the ground and rolled, coming along to his feet, he thought of Gamina and wondered if she was in any danger. From the spooked horses, he looked about, but all he could see were riders locked in combat. He called her name in his mind. He heard her answer.
I'm fine, Boric. See to yourself. I will attempt to keep the pack animals in sight.
Attempting to think back at her, he yelled, "Be alert for the riders. They'll seek the pack animals." He glanced about, hoping to find a dropped weapon, but saw none. Then suddenly a rider was galloping toward him, one of his own guards, shouting at him. Boric couldn't understand him, but sensed something behind. He spun as 2 bandits bore down upon him, one pointing a scimitar at the guard who raced towards them, and the other veering his horse towards the prince. As the guard was intercepted by the first rider, Boric braced himself and then jumped at the horse's bridle, causing the mount to stumble and throw his rider. The horse's chest struck the prince, the heavy impact sending Boric flying back, landing upon the ground with a heavy thud. Quickly he was on his feet, poised for the attack he knew was coming. The raider had also come up ready to fight, but had the advantage of his weapon. Boric pulled his glowing staff from his belt, attempting to use it to defend himself. The bandit swung badly. Boric slipped the blow, moving inside the man's guard. He drove the head of the staff into the pit of the man's stomach, generating a satisfying explosion of breath out as the bandit went down. The wind knocked out of him. Then Boric broke the staff over the man's head, leaving the raider unconscious or dead. The prince didn't have time to investigate. He picked up the fallen rider's sword, a short-bladed, heavy thing, suitable for hacking in close quarters, not as sharp as the scimitar most of the raiders used, nor as pointed as a good rapier. Boric turned and attempted to see what was going to happen, but all that was visible were milling, cursing shadows and sandy gloom. Then he felt, more than he heard, something behind him. He ducked to one side as a blow intended to crack his skull glanced off the side of his head, falling heavily. He attempted to roll away from the rider who had taken him by surprise from the rear. He rose to his knees and was almost to his feet when the chest of a horse struck him, as the rider used the mount as a weapon. Stunned as he lay on the ground, the prince barely understood what he saw, as the rider leapt from his mount and came to stand over him. Through the dust and his own muddled senses, the prince watched, with some detachment, as the man drew back a boot and kicked him in the head. James spun his horse and moved to intercept a bandit heading toward the pack horses. 2 soldiers were down by his count, and Locklear was engaged in a running fight with a raider. The raider veered off, and for an instant James was in an island of relative calm in the midst of the struggle. He glanced about, trying to discover the whereabouts of the 2 princes, and saw Erlon clubbing a raider from his horse, but saw no sign of Boric. Then through the howl of the sandstorm, James heard Locklear's command, "To me! To me!" Abandoning his search for Boric, James spurred his horse, headed toward the gathering band of Ironmen. Quickly, commands were given and obeyed, and where moments before the milling band of surprise guards had been fleeing, now a trained unit of finest horsemen in the kingdom had in service sat ready to receive the next attack by the bandits. Then the raiders were upon them, and the battle was joined in full. Furious cries and screams of pain cut through the constant howl of the wind and sting of the sand. James felt a giddy mix of elation and fear, a sensation he'd not experienced since the battle at Sethenon. He struck out a raider, driving him back as the severity of the storm increased. Then the storm overcame the battle, and all was whirling dust and noise. Each man knew he now had a blind spot, for to look into the storm was impossible. Men vainly attempted to cover their faces with clothes and sleeves, but the only relief was to turn from the storm. After a distant screaming wind, the storm diminished. A grunt of surprise and a wet sound of blood, filling a throat gasping for breath, was followed only by the sound of metal clanking as the horses again moved at the rider's command. Steel upon steel rang out, and men again strove to kill strangers. Then there was only the storm, and the fighting was forgotten. The gusts were literally blinding, for to turn one's face to the shrieking sounds was to risk losing sight. Covering his face, James turned himself and his mount away from the wind, conscious of his unprotected back. But there was nothing else to do. He was given at least partial comfort by the knowledge that the raiders were blind as he. Again the winds lessened, and James spun his mount to face any possible attacker. But like phantoms of a dream, the raiders were gone into the storm. James glanced about and could only see the men of the Isle. Locklear gave orders and the company dismounted, each man gripping his horse's reins firmly as the intensity of the storm alternately increased and diminished. Turning the animals' backs to the wind, they waited for the seemingly endless howl of wind to stop. Locklear shouted, "Are you hurt?" James indicated no. "Gamina?" he asked after his wife. Locklear pointed to the rear, and she was with the baggage animals. Boric was seeing after her. Then Gamina's voice sounded in James's mind.
"I am here, beloved. I'm unhurt. But Boric and another guard were carried off by the raiders."
James shouted. "Gamina says that Boric and a guard were carried off." Locklear swore. "There's nothing we can do but wait for the storm to blow out." James tried to look into the dusty murk and could barely see 10 feet away. All they could do was wait. Boric groaned, and a rough toe jammed into his ribs and brought him to consciousness. Above him, the wind still shrieked, and the sandstorm itself blew itself full fury. But the sheltered gully where the raiders hid was relatively quiet. He levered himself onto an elbow and found his hands were shackled by chains of an odd design. Beside him lay an unconscious guard from his own band. Tied with ropes, the man mumbled slightly, but was not conscious. Matted blood dried in his hair now. He had received a vicious head wound. A rough hand reached out and grabbed Boric by the chin, yanking him face to face with the man who had kicked him. The man squatted before Boric. He was thin, wore his beard cut close, so that it looked little more than stubble. His head was covered in a turban that once may have looked fine, but now looked faded and lice-ridden. He wore simple trousers and tunic and high boots. Over his shoulders stood another man, wearing an unadorned leather vest over his bare chest. His head was shaved, save for a single lock of hair down the middle, and a large gold ring hung in his left ear. Boric recognized these trademarks of the Guild of Slavers from Durban. The first man nodded at Boric and then looked at the guard with the bloody face, and shook his head in the negative. The slaver pulled Boric roughly to his feet without a word, and the thin man took out a dagger, and before Boric realized his intent, cut the unconscious guard's throat. The slaver whispered harshly in Boric's ear, "No tricks, spellcaster. Those chains will blank out your magic, or Muscatoni the trader will have my dagger for dinner. We move before your friends find us. Speak a single word aloud, and I will kill you." He spoke in a northern Keshian dialect. Boric, still groggy from the blow to his head, only nodded weakly. The slaver pulled him along through the small gully where a group of horsemen were ransacking a bundle of baggage. One of the men swore quietly. The slaver's companion passed where Boric stood and grabbed the man. "What did you find?" he asked, speaking the patois of the desert, mingling the Keshian king's tongue and the language of the desert men of Yolapur. "Women's clothing, and some dried meats and cakes. Where is the god we were promised?" The thin man, obviously the leader, swore as well. "I'll kill that liff. He said the nobles brought gold to the empress." The slaver shook his head as if he had expected this sort of disappointment. "You should know better than to trust fools." He glanced up at where the wind shrieked overhead and said, "The storm passes. We're only a yard from this one's companions." He inclined his head at Boric. "We do not want to be found here when the storm is over." The thin man turned his face to his companions. "I lead this band, Kasim." He looked to be on the edge of rage. "I will say when we move and when we stay." The slaver shrugged. "If we stay, we will have to fight again, Lute. I will be ready this time, and I see nothing to make me think that we'll find gold and jewelries with this band." The man called Lieutenant glanced around, a near feral light in his eyes. "These are armed soldiers." He closed his eyes a moment as if about to cry, then opened them and clenched his teeth. Boric recognized a man with a violent temper who ruled this company through intimidation and threats, as much as through any natural leadership. "Ah!" he exclaimed, nodding at Boric. He said, "Kill him, and let us flee." Kasim moved Boric behind him, as if protecting him, and said, "Our agreement was I would have the prisoners for slaves. Otherwise my men would not have joined yours." "Bah!" spat Luton. "We didn't need them. We were more a match for those guards. We were both misled by that fool Lefe." As the wind began to lessen, Kasim said, "I don't know who is worse, the fool or he who listens to the fool. But I will have this man for the auction. He is my prophet in Durban. My guild would not look kindly upon returning without at least this small profit." Whirling to face Boric, the man called Luton said, "You, where is the gold?" Feigning ignorance, Boric said, "Gold." Luton stepped forward and struck the prince across the face. "The gold some nobles brought to the Empress's jubilee." Boric extemporized. "Nobles. There was a party of nobles passed a long way, 2, 3 noblemen, with guards, I think, heading for and in. The inn of the 12 chairs, I think. We hurry because the hide trader was anxious to get his hides to the tanner before they turned rotten." Luton turned and shrieked his fury into the wind. 2 men nearby put hands to swords, startled by the sound. "Quiet!" said Kasim. Luton spun his dagger out and pointed at Kasim. "Don't order me, slaver!" He then pointed his dagger at Boric. "This one is lying, and I'll have more of these damned boots to show for 3 men killed." Boric glanced down and saw the boots he had won gambling were now on Luton's feet. He had been thoroughly searched while unconscious, it seemed. Luton shoved Kasim aside, coming to face Boric directly. "I'd have the truth of him as well." He drew back the dagger as if to thrust at Boric and then stiffened. A sad, almost apologetic expression crossed his face for an instant, and then he fell to his knees. Behind him, Kasim withdrew the dagger he had just stabbed into Luton's back. Kasim then grabbed Luton by the hair and said, "Never threaten me, you stupid man." And then, with a quick jerk, he pulled back Luton's head and sliced his neck, sending a fountain of blood spurting off to one side. "And never turn your back on me." Luton's eyes turned up in his head, and Kasim released him, letting him fall at Boric's feet. "Let this be a lesson to you in your next life." To the others in Luton's band, he said, "I lead." There was no argument voiced. Glancing around, he pointed to a depression in the small gully, overhung by a clump of boulders. "Dump him in there." 2 men picked up Luton and threw him into the depression. And the other. The dead guard was carried and tossed beside Luton. Turning to face Boric, the slaver said, "Show me no trouble, and you'll live. Trouble me, and you'll die. Understand?" Boric nodded. To the others, Kasim said, "Get ready to leave, now." And then he jumped up to the edge of the gully, Ignoring the howling wind, the powerful slaver put shoulder to one of the larger boulders and shoved it over, starting a small landslide which covered the two bodies. He leapt nimbly down into the depression and glanced about as if anticipating trouble from one of Luton's men. When no one offered him any difficulty, he rose to his full height. To the oasis of the broken pumps. Thank you for the drink, Jody. I appreciate you for that. The Emeralds lady passing drinks around. What are your skills? The slaver stood before Boric, whose wits were slowly returning to him. He had been dragged to a horse and forced to ride with his hands manacled. The pounding he had taken had added to the disorientation he had felt since his capture. He vaguely recalled the storm suddenly being over and then arriving at an odd oasis, surrounded by 3 ancient palm trunks, broken off by some cataclysmic storm of years gone by. Boric shook his head to clear it and answered back in the formal court language of Kesh. What skills? The slaver took his answer as a sign of confusion from the head blow. What tricks, what magics do you do? Boric understood. The slaver judged him a magician from Stardog, which accounted for the magic blanking chains. For an instant, Boric felt an impulse to explain who he was, but thoughts of his father receiving ransom demands on his behalf kept him from answering quickly. He could come forth at any time between now and the slave auction at Durban, and perhaps between now and then he could conspire to escape. Suddenly, the man lashed out and struck the prince with a backhanded blow. I have no time to be gentle with you, mate. Your party is but a few hours away, and no doubt will be looking for you. Or even if they have no love for you in their hearts, there will be many Imperial patrols out. We mean to be far from here. Quickly! Another man came to stand over the kneeling man. Kazim, just kill him, and leave him. No one pays good price for a magician at the slave blocks. Too much trouble keeping them in line. Kasim looked over his shoulder and said, I lead the band now. I'll decide who we kill and who we take to market. Boric said, I'm no magician. I won the robes in a game of poker. The second man ran a hand over his dark bearded face. He lies. It's some magician trick to get free of manacles and kill us all with his magic. I say kill him now. And I say that if you don't shut up and quit arguing, there will be another worthless carcass for the vultures to feast on. Get the men ready. As soon as the horses have been watered and rested, I want to put as much distance as I can between those guards and us. To Boric he said, we have found some pretty bubbles in the bottom of your bag, mage. The lady you rode with had enough gold for me to pay these brigands. You're my profit. With an inarticulate grunt, the raider moved away, signaling the others to ready for riding. Boric managed to sit upright against a large boulder. I'm no magician. Well, you're no fighting man either. To travel unarmed at the edge of your pole, one must be either have a great company of guards, or have a great deal of faith. Faith is for priests, but you're not. You don't look the fool, but then, I've never been one for casual appearances. Shifting from Cashin to the King's tongue, he said, where are you from? Krondo. Boric decided through his aching head he would be best served by obscuring his identity. But I've travelled a lot. The slaver sat back on his haunches, arms resting on his knees. You're not much more than a boy. You speak Kashin like a courtier, and your kingdom tongue is nearly as fair. If you're not a spellcaster, what are you? Improvising, Boric said. I teach. I know several languages. I can read, write, and do sums. I know history and geography. I can recite the lines of kings and empresses and the names of major nobles and trading houses. Enough! Interrupted Kasim. You've convinced me. A tutor, then is it? Well, there are rich men who need educated slaves to teach their children. Without warning or waiting for any response from Boric, he stood up, and as he stepped away, he said, "You're worthless to me yet, teacher. But I am also not a patient man. Do not be too much trouble and you will live, because with difficulty and I'll kill you as soon as spit on you." To the band he said, "Mount up, we ride for Durban." And so ends chapter 5 of Prince of the Blood. What a hell of a journey we're on so far. Leave it to Boric to get kidnapped. What a pot. Oh wow, this next... Oh, hang on. I was about to say this next chapter is long. It's not. The next chapter is not terribly long. Next chapter is only 10 pages. We can do that. Castle, does your clan have a specific tartan? So yes, my grandfather's clan, who is our Grand Chieftain, has a tartan. And my father's family also has a tartan. My father's family has 2 tartans, as a matter of fact. We have our intermarrial tartan, and then we also have the O'Brien clan. My connection is breaking up. I'm going to need to do a restart. I'll be back as soon as I can. All right, Bear. I don't know if you're still in, but do what you need to do, my friend. We can. I think we've got it. I don't have any that are with me. So, about, let's see, how long ago would it be now? About 12 years ago, my mother's house was robbed, and a bunch of my books, my collectibles, and my kilts and my adornments, and a bunch of other things were stolen from my mother's house back in 2015, 2014. So about 11, 12 years ago. And so I've not had any of my traditional wear since then, because everything I brought back from my grandfather's, I had left with my mother. I have a couple of things left over that I brought back with me when I came that I still had with me that didn't get stolen. But I had a couple of old German books. I had a couple of my old journals. I had my great kilts, my buckles, my brooches, my adornments, my rings and necklaces, my hair ornaments, as well as all of my collectibles. I had a bunch of old retro games and things like that that were all stolen when my parents' house was robbed. So. And I'm not on good terms with my grandfather anymore, so I can't get anything that is official from my family anymore because we're not on good terms. But I will at some point get another one made. I just haven't had the capital to do it. I understand that pain. I was robbed around 2015, 2016, and one of the things that was stolen was my father's ashes. That's dreadful. That's such a dreadful thing. People are heartless. I'm back. It's a little better now. Excellent, Bear. Excellent. Hydrate. You've got it, Songbird. You've got it. Sludge now. But yeah, I can put up an example of my father's family tartan. I would have to get something custom made for our intermarrial tartan because it's in there's two different sets of colors. But I could probably post an example of my father's familial tartan. I'm afraid I'll have to say goodnight. Thank you for the exciting story, Master Castle. Have a good night, everyone. Good night, Hannah. It was lovely to see you. Hopefully we see you back Sunday or Tuesday. But in the meantime, I hope that you rest well. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend, and that in all that you do, you find success and contentment. All right, let's see how. All right, we need to run. We need to run ads real quick over on Twitch, and then we're just gonna dive right into the next chapter. How does that sound? All right, so Twitch friends, we're gonna have another 3 minutes, and then we're gonna hold another hour without them, and we should be able to get at least one more chapter in tonight. So sit tight. We will return. But yeah, I can. Jacob, are you? I don't think that you are in the. Are you in the Tavern Guild, the Discord? If you're not, I can post an example in either in the Tavern broadcast channel over on Facebook, or maybe I could put one in the story in my Facebook story. I should do stories more often. I just don't. It's because the idea of creating something. The idea of creating something that's going to disappear. Spartan 2. Okay. All right. Excellent. I didn't know that was you, but excellent. So now I do know that that's you. Yeah, I will post it. I'll post an example of it over in the Discord. When are your Storytime live? So they're supposed to start between 4:30 and 5:30. They rarely ever do. We usually start sometime between 6 o'clock and 7:30. I keep saying hopefully we're going to get to a point. Nobody really looks at Facebook stories. I try to make the ones I put out interesting, but it just seems so strange to me to create something that's going to disappear. And I don't think that my life is interesting enough for me to just be like, "Hi guys, this is the thing I'm doing." I don't know. It's weird. The social media is very vain, and I try to keep the tavern focused more on stories and tavern folk. I think that the tavern is about you all, and it's about your stories and the stories of our ancestors and the stories of our friends and family and the stories of things yet to come and new stories. And I can't say that I am particularly excited to ever share anything about myself, because there's not a whole lot that I do that's particularly exciting. But I do like the idea of keeping stories alive. It's something our family has done for generations. It's also my time to slip away. I have 4 more days of work for this year. Then I will have more time. Thank you for the Story Castle Tavern family. Be safe, and I will see you all on Sunday. Frost, thank you kindly for your service as a barkeep. I appreciate you, my friend. I hope that you rest well. And best of luck on your last 4 days of work. You have 1 more this Friday, and then just 2 more next week. So do them well and make the best of it, and we'll enjoy your vacation with you. So rest well, brother, and have a good night. Man, I've been trying to grow social media on Facebook for the Messianic Lodge, and I'm an officer and it's not easy, the Masonry niche. What I have found with I've been doing social media professionally for like 17 years now. It's been a long time. Been doing this, a very long time. I don't even want to think about how long. 15, 17 years, somewhere in there. And what I have found with social media is that it has to be outward facing. Like, sure, people are interested in the lady and I and what we do, and that's all well and good. But the reason why people love the tavern, at least as far as I can tell, is because the tavern is not focused on me, it's not focused on the lady, it's focused on stories. It's focused on bringing you into this magical place that we are privileged to live in, this place where stories live and come alive. And we bring you into the world that we live in, and we enjoy stories with you, and we tell your stories. If when we get a chance, we tell stories about people's names and about their ancestors and about their history and about places where their families are from and places where they want to go. It is focused purely on the patrons of the tavern. It's focused on what is the value that you get when you come into the tavern. You get to relax. You get to enjoy a story. You get some camaraderie. One of the big things I think that people like about the tavern is that we are ardent of our rejection of drama and the modern ethos of social media. Like I'll still go back and forth with people in comments, especially if there's a debate on something. Like there's all sorts of historical and mythological things that are contentious, and I'm willing to go back and forth with people. I said this the other day. One of the things that bothers me the most is I get this a lot on YouTube. Is I'll have a really good conversation with somebody, and sometimes I'm wrong. You know, sometimes I'll mispronounce something, or sometimes I'll pronounce something the way that my family does, and forget to note that that's not the common pronunciation. Sometimes I'll get a date wrong. Sometimes I'll get a name wrong, and you know I'm not perfect. I occasionally get things wrong. It happens. Um, and when I am corrected in comments, I leave the conversation there because then people can see that I gracefully or sometimes sarcastically accept the correction. And but what'll happen is sometimes I'll have a really good conversation with somebody where that person turned out to be wrong, and then they'll go back and they'll delete all of their comments so the entire thread disappears. And that's tragic to me because so many people could have learned from that conversation who have the same misconception that the person did, but because they don't want to be embarrassed by having not known something, they go and they delete it, and that's tragic to me. This idea that we have to be perfect and that we have to know everything, or that we can't just have a wrong opinion. Like you can have a wrong opinion. You're welcome to. Well, I guess it depends on what country you live in, but you can have a wrong opinion. Lots of people do. Lots of people have opinions that are very, very wrong, but that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to have that opinion. You can still have it. You just have to acknowledge that it's something you keep because it is something you hold dear. It's not something you keep because it's correct. That's all right. I love having discourse to such an extent that I will talk with anyone about anything, although I do my best not to argue when talking. Yeah, and I do the same thing. Like, I will firmly correct people if they're wrong, because, you know, in what we do, there's a lot of misconceptions. Like, a lot of people will have these ideas. Like, probably the most common ones that you'll get is things like, in regards to Norse mythology, right? I'll get a lot of people who come in and go, oh, well, Odin is Loki's father, or Thor and Loki are brothers. And I'm like, well, no. that is a, you know, a modern interpretation that has come about as a result of Marvel. And the Marvel story and Marvel movies. But I always try to gently correct people, and some people will be, like, belligerent, and they'll be like, no, you're wrong, you're stupid, how could you not know that Thor and Loki are brothers? And then in that case, I either end the conversation, or I'll be a bit snarky. I mean, I'm an Irishman, and now I'm an American. I've been an American for 20 years. I'm an Irishman and an American. I can't not be snarky. You know, it's part of it's two of the cultures I live in are about being snarky and sassy. I'd be doing my ancestors a disservice if I didn't. But yeah, I'll get all kinds of stuff like that, and then if I get a point in a conversation where somebody actually comes to an understanding, and again, like there are times when I'm wrong and I correct, you know, I take the correction and I leave the thread up because I want people to see that, you know, even as well read and as well researched as the things that I do are, occasionally I get things wrong, and it's okay to be wrong. Like you're allowed, and you will be wrong sometimes. It's your Irish pride that gets the best of you sometimes. It does. That boiling Irish blood will get to you, I tell you. You let it go for too long, and it'll do you in one. Jazz, thank you for the rose, love. I appreciate you for that. Tips to the Tavern Keeper, always appreciated. But yeah, I don't quite understand why. No, I do understand. People don't want to be embarrassed by being wrong, but it is a tragedy because I have so many good conversations with people in comments and terrible conversations. Like I have some people who are just completely unreasonable, but I have some really good conversations. One of my favorite things about doing this is that the tavern brings in so many different people, and all of the conversations are learning curves. Like, even if I'm not learning something new about the topic, I'm learning something new about how to teach the topic, about how to convey it in a way that helps people to understand. And so even when I'm not learning anything new about the thing that we're talking about, I'm still learning something from it, and I love that. But some people are too embarrassed to be wrong, and this is what a big problem we have nowadays, is that people are so afraid, like, being wrong is seemingly a worse fate than going through the labor of being correct. So people will just pretend like they're never wrong. And it's dreadful. It's a terrible thing to do. I want to learn as much as I possibly can. I don't like being wrong, but I learn something new when I am, so I love it. Yeah, I mean, it's never comfortable being wrong. Like, nobody ever wants to be told that they're incorrect. Nobody wants to be told that they had a bad idea. Nobody wants to be told that their perception of the world is a wrong one. But occasionally it is. That's life. If ever you were born perfect and you could go through, well, you know, that basically makes you a deity at that point. And even then, there are very few mythological or theological beliefs in the world where the deities are perfect. Just is what it is. As I often tell the bear cubs, I'm always right unless their mother rabbits is. I once got into a fight with a guy on TikTok where he was, thank you, Jazz, thank you for the heart hands, I appreciate you so much. I got into a bickerance with a guy that a long time ago, this was probably 6 years ago at this point on TikTok, we had a huge back and forth, and I was being a twat with it. I was being very, very unkind with the way I handled this argument. And it essentially boiled down to I completely lost my train of thought. Yeah, my whole brain, I just completely forgot what I was going to say. Anyways. When you correct people, sometimes they stand there speechless and they have nothing else to say. I don't often get challenged in real life. Most people will not come up to me and tell me that I am wrong about something. But in the few times I've had conversations where I do correct people in person, most of the time they get so uncomfortable they don't want to continue the conversation. And I'm very gentle with the way I correct people most of the time. And like, I try to make whenever there is a point where somebody is overwhelmingly wrong, I do my best to correct them in a gentle way. And there'll be times when people think they know something really well and they get very offended by being corrected, which is fair. Like, if you hold something really dear to your heart and then somebody comes and says, oh, that's wrong, that's incorrect, then yeah, you're going to get your hackles up because it's a part of your identity. And that's why I try to always correct gently, because I'm not trying to, like, assault people's identities, because a lot of people get really wrapped up in things that they believe, and it becomes a part of who they are. And it becomes so much a part of who they are that they're not willing to take criticism or critique on it. And it's a big problem in this day and age, is that a lot of people live their lives that way. They do not want to be corrected, and they don't want to be told that anything about who they perceive themselves as being could possibly be incorrect. And that is a problem, because it makes having conversations very hard. When someone believes that something about them is so immutable that it cannot be wrong, you can't really talk to a person like that, because then they believe that you are then assaulting them if ever you point out something that they are doing that is incorrect, or something they believe that is inaccurate or incorrect. Like, if somebody comes up to you and they say, oh, well, the sky is yellow. Like, I'll say, well, are you colorblind? You know, I'll go through the things. And they go, no, but I believe that the color that the sky is called yellow. And I'm like, well, okay, but evidence and history and continuum have told us the sky is blue. The sky, most of us perceive it as blue, and unless you have something that is different in your brain or in your eyes, you're going to perceive the sky as a shade of blue in the daytime. And, you know, sometimes people just don't want to have that conversation. One of the things I dislike the most is when someone corrects me and then does the exact same. Yeah, well, hypocrisy is always frustrating. I get a lot of young men who I talk to either from my university days or just as young men that I know from various different jobs that I've worked, who will come to me about social and theological arguments. And I don't like to have religious or political discussions with most people because they cannot keep a level head. They cannot keep themselves from being emotionally driven in those conversations. And so I'm not the kind of person who likes to sit and talk in circles. Even though that's kind of what I do when I'm here on these story times, is we talk about a lot of the same things. But I don't like to have a conversation that is inconstructive, right? I don't like to have a conversation where the other person is coming into it with the intention of winning an argument, but not of changing their mind if it turns out they're incorrect. Because if I go into an argument and I ardently believe that I am correct, and somebody gives me compelling evidence to suggest that I am wrong, I might be upset about it, but at the time I'm going to sit and I'm going to observe and I'm going to look at what the evidence that was brought before me is, and I'm going to verify it. And if it turns out that I was actually incorrect, then I'm going to own up to that. And again, it's always uncomfortable. It's never fun. But you don't grow if you're not willing to do that. Discussing religion and politics is outright banned inside the Messianic Lodge. Yeah, I will discuss politics and religion in an old sense. Like, we'll talk about long past politics and religious things, but generally I avoid it completely in the tavern, because you can go pretty much anywhere and get that kind of drama and have people talk smack about other people and all of these other things, and there's no need for it here. Again, most people cannot keep their maturity about them when discussing those topics, and they're good. You can have a good conversation around them, and they're things that are well worth discussing. But if it's going to be a non-constructive discussion where people are just shit slinging, then I have no desire to be in that conversation at all, just generally. Because it's about the brotherhood and building ourselves to be better men to help our community, and those two topics are more emotionally charged and divided topics than you can discuss. Yeah, that's the truth of it. Most folk cannot keep a level head when talking about politics, religion, and now we're getting to a point where social issues and even education can't be talked about. I had a woman get very emotionally charged at me for talking about phonics and talking about traditional mathematics, like old traditional, because I don't particularly care for the way that mathematics and such are taught nowadays. I prefer the old way, and maybe that's just nostalgia or something in me. But forgive the in your face. I ask myself, what is the intention, and do you want to die on that hill? Yeah, and that's fair. That's fair. Songbird. Yeah. All right. Let's get back into stories, friends. I know I got off on a bit of a tangent there. It's just I've had two really good conversations in the last week in the comments of story times, and both individuals deleted their comment because what they were saying was incorrect. And I got heated about it. I'm like, I curse your whole bloodline if you do this. If you come in here, you have this whole conversation, and then because you found out that you were incorrect or that you were wrong, you then delete the comment. I curse your bloodline. I dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow, dishonor on your whole family. Not really, but actually, yes. I as much as I am able, dishonor on your family. All right, friends, let's get back into the story. Chapter 6 of Prince of the Blood by Raymond E. Feist. Dilemma. Erlon turned his horse. Borek! He shouted over the still howling winds. James and the guards watched from where they stood holding their horses. The newly elevated Earl shouted, "Get off your horse before she runs you away with you." The already excited mount was snorting and whining at the frightening noises and stinging blasts of Sunstorm, despite her training and Erlon's firm control. The prince ignored James's orders and continued to circle away from the others, shouting for his brother. "Boric!" Gamina stood beside her husband and said,
"It's difficult to concentrate with this wind screaming in my ears, but there are thoughts coming from that direction."
She covered her face with her forearm and turned and pointed to the west. "Boric," asked Locklear. "Boric," asked Locklear, who stood next to James with his back to the biting wind. Gamina held up her arm, letting the sleeve of her gown shield her face.
"No, I'm sorry. I don't know these men, but none of the minds I've touched is his. When I attempt to focus on what I remember of his thoughts during the battle."
"Nothing," James finished.
"Could he be unconscious?"
Locklear's expression was hopeful. Gamina said,
"If he's stunned or farther away, then I would not sense him. My abilities are limited by the strength and training of the other mind. I can speak to my father from over 100 miles away, and he can speak to me through incredible distances. But those who attacked us are no more than a few 100 feet away. I get images and stray words about the fire."
With sadness in her voice, she said,
"I can't sense Boric anywhere."
James reached out to her and she came into the comfort of his arm. His horse nickered at the change in pressure on the reins, and James gave an impatient yank on his leathers, silencing the animal. Softly, so that only Gamina could hear, he said, "I pray the gods let him be alive." For an hour the wind blew, and Erlon circled his companions to the limit of his ability to see them. While he cried his brother's name, the wind ceased, and in the silence that followed, his hoarse cries rang across the desolate landscape. "Boric!" Locklear signalled to the captain of his company for a report. The officer said, "3 men, dead or missing, my lord. 2 more wounded, enough. We should get them to shelter. The rest are fit and ready." James considered his options, then decided. "You're to remain here with Erlon and search the immediate area. And don't wander too far. I'll take 2 men and ride to the end of the 12 chairs and see if that Keshian patrol can help us locate Boric." With a glance around the barren landscape, he added, "I'm certain I have no idea where to begin looking." For the next few hours, through the early afternoon, it took all of Locklear's powers of persuasion and some not so idle threatening to keep Erlon from riding farther into the west than Locklear judged safe. The young prince was frantic to search for his brother, in case he was lying unconscious a few yards away in a gully or ravine in need of care. Locklear spread the men out to patrol the surrounding area, always keeping a chain of guards posted so that someone was always in sight of the impromptu camp. Gamina tended to the wounded, getting them ready to ride to the closest shelter when James returned. Finally, James returned, accompanied by the Keshian patrol. Sergeant Ras Al-Fai was obviously displeased to have his respite interrupted, especially given the potential for personal difficulty should his superiors judge him somehow at fault, as the attack came in his patrol's area. He wished to put as much distance between himself and these cursed Ironmen as possible, but the possibility of an international incident between the Empire and her largest neighbor gave sufficient reason for him to put the irritation aside and help in search of the lost prince. Yeah, can you imagine? Two princes from a neighboring kingdom come into your land, and the first thing that happens is right after they meet some of your own soldiers, they're raided by bandits and kidnapped into a slave market. Good Lord. Experienced trackers quickly discovered the gully wherein the raiders had hidden. Shouts brought the entire company to the edge of a gully where two scouts were inspecting a large rock fall. One continued poking about in the rubble while the second scout carried a single boot up to where the Ironman waited. There was no mistaking the scarlet and yellow design of the boot. Pointing back down at the mass of boulders, he said, "My lord, I found this, a little farther in under the rocks. I can see what's left of the foot that wore it." Erlon sat in silent shock as James asked, "Can we dig him out?" The Keshian scout at the bottom of the rock fall shook his head. "It would take a company of engineers 2 days." Oh, wait, this is Keshian. "It would take a company of engineers a day or two at best, my lord." He pointed up at the place the slide had begun. "It was done recently from the signs, to cover the owner of this boot, and others perhaps." Then he pointed to the far side of the gully. If too much movement occurred here, the other side might come down as well. I'm afraid it will be risky. I want him dug out." "I understand," Erlon interrupted. "No, you don't. There may not be boric down there." Locklear attempted to be understanding. "I know how you must feel." "No," said Erlon, "you don't." And James said, "We don't know that's boric down there. He could have lost the boat during the struggle. He could be a prisoner. We don't know if that's him under those rocks." Gamina, James said, "Gamina, is there any sign of boric?" Gamina just shook her head.
"The thoughts I detected earlier were in this gully, but there was no pattern of thinking that was familiar."
Erland was unmoved.
"That proves nothing."
To James he said,
"You know how close he and I are. If he were dead, I'd feel something."
Looking across the broken landscape of the high desert, he said, "He's out there somewhere, and I intend to find him." "And what are you going to do, my lord?" asked the Keshian sergeant. "Ride out into the plateau country alone, and without water or food?" "It doesn't look it. But it's as much a desert here as in the great sands ergs of Yalpur. Beyond that rise of ridges, over there the true sandy waste begins. And if you don't know where the oasis of Broken Palms is, you'll not live long enough to find the oasis of Hungry Goats. There are 30 or so places out there you can find water, and a few with food-bearing plants as well. But you can walk within yards of several and not know them. You would die, young lord." Turning his horse back toward the way they had come, Sergeant Rasafari said, "My lords, I grieve for your loss, but my duty dictates I ride on and discover others bent upon breaking the Empire's peace. I shall file a report on this when I reach the terminus of my patrol. If you would like, I'll leave a scout with you, and you may continue your search. When you're satisfied that nothing more can be done, head back to the road." Pointing south, he said, "The road continues past the foothills of the Pillars of the Stars to Narayab. We keep many stations and patrols along that route. Dispatch riders move constantly among those stations and into the heart of the Empire. Send word ahead of your arrival, and the state welcome will be mounted by Governor Narayab. From there, he will send mounted soldiers to protect you until you reach the city of Kesh." He left unsaid that had this been done from the start, the bandits would never have been able to surprise the island men. In time, the Emperor's blessings be upon her. Will order engineers to retrieve your young prince, and he will be returned home for a fitting burial. Until then, I can only wish you the God's favour in your travels." With a wave and heels on the side of his horse, The sergeant and his patrol headed away from the gully. James skirted the top of the fall and looked down to see the lone Keshian scout who remained. What do you see? The scout considered the signs. Many men, milling about. A murder, here. He pointed to the dark spot upon the already dry ground. Murder, said Locklear. How can you be certain? Blood, my lord, answered the scout, which would not be unusual after a struggle, save that this is a large pool, with no signs of a wounded man approaching this spot. I would guess a throat was cut. He pointed to the 2 lines of faint scratches in the dust, leading from the bloodstain to the rockfall. 2 hills. As someone was dragged to where the rock was pushed. He pointed again to the top of the gully. One climbed there. He pointed about once more, then scampered up to incline to where the horse waited. They moved south, to the oasis of Broken Palms. Locklear said, How do you know? The guard smiled. It is the only place they can go, my lord. For they move into the desert, and without baggage horses they cannot carry enough water to see them through to Durban. Durban, Erland spat the word. That rat hole. Why would they risk the dangers of the desert to go there? Because, James answered, it is a safe harbour for every cutthroat and pirate, from every nation bordering the bitter sea. And the best market for slaves in the Empire, said the scout. And the heart of the Empire, slaves are plentiful, but up here very difficult to find. Only Kesh and Queg have open markets for slaves. In the free cities in the kingdom, the practice is discouraged. Jason, hello, welcome in. I hope it finds you all well and relaxing. Thank you for streaming the Tale Fast. Of course, my pleasure. Welcome in. We're so very glad to have you. Grab a seat. Fill your tankard. We've got another half chapter or so to go tonight. Erlon said, I don't follow. James turned his horse toward the direction the scout had indicated and said, I found the 2 guards. Quickly he added, or Bulrit, and 1 guard remained alive. There's enough profit at the Durban slave auction to make the raid profitable. If they are taken into the Empire, the money is less than a third what it is in Durban. And then the leader has an angry crew to govern, and that can be dangerous. James spoke with authority. Erlon said, Then why wouldn't Boric just tell them who he is? He's certainly worth more in ransom than he'd ever fetch as a slave. James looked out thoughtfully across the wasteland as the late afternoon sun, and then he said, If he's alive, I would have expected a message from the raiders. Something telling us that he is well and for us not to follow, and that ransom demand would be made within a short time. It's what I would have done. I would have made sure I didn't have any company of soldiers dogging my heels. The Keshian scout ventured. These raiders may not be as clever as you, my lord. Your prince, should he live, may feel it dangerous to tell them who he is. They might cut his throat to avoid trouble and flee into the wastes. He may be unconscious, yet not injured enough for them to abandon. There may be answers, my lord, Erlon said. Then we must hurry. The scout said, We must proceed cautiously to avoid ambush, Highness. He pointed into the sandy landscape. If slavers attack the road, then out there at an oasis or in the wadis a slave caravan gathers. Many raiders with many guards will bring their catch to be taken to Durban. Many more fighters than we could face, even had my sergeant remained. More than both our companies could face. Perhaps 100 guards. Feeling the heavy weight of despair begin to descend upon him, Erlon said, "We'll find him. He isn't dead." But his own words sounded hollow in his ears. The scout scrambled up the wall of the gully to where his horse waited. "If we ride quickly, my lord, we shall reach the oasis of Broken Palms at sundown." James detailed 2 guards to accompany the 2 wounded men back to the inn, where they would recuperate until they were ready to return to the kingdom. He did a swift calculation and realized now he had only 12 healthy soldiers. Feeling vulnerable and somewhat foolish, he ordered that small band into the desert. The sun was touching the horizon when the scout rode at a gallop towards the Isleman. James signaled a halt, reining his mount. The scout said, "In the Wadi al-Safar, the caravan gathers. 100 guards, maybe more." James swore, and Erlon said, "Any sign of my brother?" "I could not get close enough to tell, my prince." "Is it clear? Any place nearby where we could get close to the camp?" asked Locklear. "A shallow ravine courses along one side of the wadi, and at the far end it becomes a gully running close to the camp, my lord. 4, maybe 5 men could approach unobserved, be they stealthy. But it is dangerous. At the far end, it becomes shallow enough for a standing man to see into the camp, but it is also close enough for a standing man to be noticed." Erlon began to dismount, but James said, "No, you'll clank like an armourer's wagon in that chain. Wait here." Gamina said, "I should go, James. I can tell if Borik's in the caravan, if I can get close enough." "How close is close enough?" asked her new husband. "A stone's throw," answered Gamina. James asked the scout, "Can we get that close?" The scout said, "We should be close enough to see if any of the pigs have boils on their faces, my lord." "Good," said Gamina, picking the hem of her riding gown so it stayed clear of the ground. She tucked it into her wide leather belt in a fashion of Stardock fisherwomen when they waded into the shallows. James ignored the unseemly display, exposing her 2 slender white legs very high up on the thighs as he attempted to think of a good reason to object to her coming along. He couldn't. It's the problem with having a logical mind and giving women credit for the abilities men. He mused to himself as he dismounted. You can't contrive reasons to keep them safe. Locklear signaled a pair of guards to accompany James. Gamina and the scout and the 5 set out down the trail on foot. They moved slowly as the sun fell below the western horizon. By the time they approached the near end of the ravine, the sky was slate grey, and the desert was alive with highlights of crimson and pink. As the reflected sunlight of the clouds over the distant sea bathed the landscape in rose twilight. Noise from the caravan echoed through the deepening gloom, and James glanced around to see if everyone stayed close. Gamina touched his arm lightly with her thoughts and came to him. "I can sense many minds in the wadi, my love." "Borik?" he asked silently. "Nothing," she admitted. "But I must get closer to be certain." Gripping the scout's arm, James whispered, "Can we get closer?" Whispering back, he answered, "There is a bend ahead, and if we follow it, we shall be close enough to urinate upon the dogs. But be cautious, my lord, for it is likely a place to dump offal and garbage, and there may be guards nearby." James nodded, and the scout led them into the gloom. "Joel, thank you kindly for the roses, my friend. Tips to the tavern keeper always appreciated." Thank you very much. So many edits today, my head feels so mushy. It is the work of the creative, Matty. You're putting in the time. Sláinte, Jason. James could remember several times in the past he'd taken short journeys that seemed to take forever. But none seemed to take so long as it took to travel the short distance to the end of the gully. As they reached it, the voice of the guards could be heard in soft conversation as they walked easily along the perimeter of the camp. Not only was the journey nerve-wracking for the danger, but the end of the gully was being used as a garbage dump and privy trench. The Ironmen had to creep through garbage and waste, both human and horse. James stepped in something wet and soft, and from the odor of which hung in the ravine like a noisome fog, he'd certain he didn't want to know what it was. He could guess. He signaled to the scout, who signaled back, and they were as close as they dared get. Cautiously, James peeked over the edge of the gully, standing no more than 10 paces away. Two silhouettes stood outlined against the campfires. Huddled near them for warmth were at least 30 miserable-looking people, but nowhere in the group could James see Boric. Not every face could be seen, but James was certain his red hair would easily be noticeable in the sea of dark heads, despite the flickering firelight. Then a man in purple robes approached the two guards for a moment, and James's chest constricted. But it wasn't Boric. The wearer of the robe had the hood tossed back, and the darkly bearded face that scowled at the two guards was one James had never seen before. He wore a sword at his hip and ordered the two men to cease their chatter and move on. The robed man turned as another joined him, a large man in a leather vest, wearing the caste mark of the Durban slavers on his arm. It was a mark James hadn't seen since he was a boy, but like all the members of the Mockers, Crondor's Thief Guild, he knew it by reputation. The Durban slavers were not men to trouble lightly. James chanced another glance at the camp, then hunkered down next to his wife. Her eyes were closed and her face was set in an expression of concentration as she sought out Boric among the prisoners in the camp. Finally, she opened her eyes and her mind's voice came to James.
There is no thought I recognize as Boric's in the camp.
Are you certain? He asked. Sadly, she said,
If he were in the camp, as close as we are, I would find him. Even were he sleeping, I could sense his presence. Were he in that camp?
She silently sighed, and he caught the echoes of sorrow in her mind.
There could be no explanation for it save he lays buried beneath the rubble back where we found the boot.
There was a moment of silence, and then she said,
He is dead.
James was motionless for an instant. Then he motioned to the scout. By a sign, he gave order to return the way they had come. The search was over. No! Elon's face was harsh as he refused to accept Ganina's pronouncement. You can't know for certain. James recounted his observations for the third time since returning to where Erlon and the balance of the company waited. I saw another bandit wearing the robe, so we can assume it's possible they took the boots from him as well. I grant that. But there's no sign of him in the camp. To the Keshian scout, he said, Is there any chance the bandits who raided us were not a part of the slaver caravan? The scout shrugged as if to say anything was possible. Probably not, my lord. By carrying off some of your men, it is unlikely it was a coincidence that you were raided. Any of your men who remained alive are for certain in that camp. James nodded. If he had been alive, Erlon, Gamina would have been able to speak to him. How can you be so certain? So that all the camp could hear her, Gamina said.
I have control over my talents, Erlon. I can choose how many or few I wish to speak to, and once I touch a mind, I can recognize its thoughts. Boric's thoughts were not among those in the camp.
Perhaps he was unconscious. Gamina shook her head sadly.
I would have sensed his presence, even if he were unconscious. There was an absence of him. I can't explain it better than that. He was not among them.
The scout said,
My lord, if I may remain with you this night, I shall have to move on to my sergeant. He will wish to know that these Durbanites. The governor of Durban is little better than a pirate and renegade himself, and sooner or later the word of this outrage will reach the court of light. When the Empress, blessings be upon her, at last decides to act, retribution shall be forthcoming, and it shall be terrible indeed. I know it cannot ease your burden, but to assault the person of the royal family en route to her jubilee is beyond insult. The Empress, blessings upon her, will no doubt make a personal insult and act to revenge your family.
Erlon's anger was not soothed in the least. What? The governor of Durban reprimanded? Then a formal letter of apology, I suppose.
More likely she will order the city surrounded and burned to the ground, with all the citizens within sight. Or if she is feeling merciful, perhaps she will only send the governor of Durban, with his family and retainers of course, to your king for punishment, sparing the city. It will depend upon her mood at the time she decides.
Erlon was overwhelmed. The shock of Borit's apparent death at the last setting over him, and the blasé attitude of the guard as he recounted such power on the part of one woman, conspired to render him without wit. He just nodded dumbly. James, seeking to turn the talk away from terrible diplomatic situation that would arise about Boric's death, said, We shall ask you to bear letters to be forwarded back to the Prince of Krondor, so that we may mitigate the difficulties between our two nations. The scout nodded.
As one who serves along the border, I would do so gladly, my lord.
And then he left to see to his horse. James nodded at Locklear, who in turn motioned with his head towards Erlon. Both young nobles moved away to speak in private. Locklear said,
This is a fine mess.
Well, we have faced difficulties in the past. This is what we were trained for, to make choices, Locklear said.
I think we should consider returning to Krondor.
James said, If we do, and the Ruther orders Erlon back to the Jubilee, we risk insulting the Empress by arriving late.
The festival will last more than 2 months,
Locklear pointed out.
We would be there before it was over.
I would rather have us there at the beginning. He glanced around at the Black Knight. Out there, something's going on. I can't help feeling that. He put a finger on Locklear's chest. It's just too much of a coincidence that we were the ones raided.
Perhaps,
agreed Lockie in part.
But if we were a target for a raid, then those behind it were those who attempted to assassinate Boric in Krondor.
Whoever they are, James was silent for a long moment and said, That makes no sense. Why would they wish to kill the boy?
To start a war between our kingdom and the Empire.
No, that's obvious. I mean, why would anyone wish war? Locklear shrugged.
Why does anyone ever wish to start one? We must discover who within the Empire will profit from a destabilized northern border. And that's our likely culprit.
Turning to find Erlon alone facing out into the desert night, James crossed to stand beside him. In quiet tones he said, You must come to terms with this, Erlon. Your grief must quickly be abandoned, and you must accept the change in circumstances fate has forced upon you. Erlon blinked in confusion as one suddenly thrust into light.
What?
James turned and stood before him with a firm hand upon the younger man's shoulder. He said, You are now the heir. You will be our next king. And you will carry the fate of your homeland with you when we ride into Kesh. Erlon seemed not to hear him, The prince said nothing as he returned his gaze to the west, to the distant slaver caravan. At last he turned his horse and slowly away and rode to where the others were, waiting to resume their trek southward, into the heart of Great Kesh. And so ends Chapter 6 of Prince of the Blood by Raymond E. Feist. What a spectacular chapter. Songbird, thank you for the Go Populars and the cool. I appreciate you. Tips to the Tavern Keeper. Always appreciated. Oh, what a spectacular romp we were on tonight. Herring, good to see you. Welcome in. Unlock. Huzzah! Yes, indeed. Well, friends, I think that we can do a song or two, and then we will end for the night. I think that we're right about the time when everybody should be heading off to bed. So let's do a couple of songs. We have 10 minutes over on Twitch before we have to run ads again. I think we can get in 2 songs before we end up. So let's get 2 songs under our belt. The great reading, thank you so much. Your pup was really thirsty. Yes, he was. He was over there slurping away. I've been listening while working. Oh, wonderful. This book is pretty good. I prefer Aragon, but I'm beginning to enjoy these characters a lot. Yeah, so I had never heard of Feist, Jacob. And then one of the tavern patrons suggested the first book in this series, and then persuaded folk over in the guild to vote for it, and it got put on as the book that we read. And it was a slow burn. I probably would not have read Magician had it not been for Storytime. But what's crazy is that it was a really slow burn. It was well written, but it was very slow. And it eventually got to a point where it was ridiculously good. And it just absolutely exceptional. Yeah, we could do the Irish pub song. Herring, you want the Kittyman shanty again? I cannot for the life of me understand why you love watching me struggle through that that silly cover. But or parody, I should say. It's that silly parody. But if that's what you want, I will give you the Kittyman shanty. Need another bottle of beer? Darth Nexus, my friend. Hello, good to see you. I've been editing so much, fixing something to make my book one flow better, and I'm happy I did, because it negates an entire awkward conversation in chapter 5, but my head feels mushy. That's the push of it. Any songs about sausages or second breakfast? Actually I do have a pretty good song that we can do that way. If you all enjoy older isometric PC RPGs, Betrayal at Krondor was written by Feist, and the story is quite good. He eventually adapted it into novel form. Excellent. I actually did not know that. So there's all sorts of intrigue. Martin should have taken some notes from Feist, because Feist writes intrigue far better than Martin does. Like, Martin's intrigue is very on the nose and like kind of beats you over the head with it. Feist is very good at sort of doing it covertly. Red is the rose, please. I suppose we could do red is the rose. Okay, so we'll do the Kittyman shanty. Good lord. We'll do the Kittyman shanty. We'll do the Irish pub song. We'll do Red is the Rose. And we will do a song about hobbits and sausages. Well, not exactly hobbits and sausages, but something similar there. Alright. Let's see what we can do. Okay, so we're going to mute the background music, and we'll do the Kittyman shanty first. Just get it out of the way. So this is a rewrite of the Wellerman by the Trailer Park Boys, and it is about the Devil's Lettuce. I was about to recommend Ocean as Thought, and then I remembered I already asked for that. That's all right. That's all right. I love the game and picked up Magician. Yeah, I probably not would not have read Magician on my own, but the fact that it was for Storytime, I'm glad that we did, because Martin is about as blunt as a sledgehammer on the back of the head. Yeah, absolutely the case, Bear. Feist writes intrigue and subtlety very well. Martin cannot do subtlety. Like everything is blatant and belligerent, which is why all of the twists in Game of Thrones feel so jarring, because they're not set up well at all. Like there is no prelude to any of the twists in Game of Thrones because Martin is terrible at writing intrigue and sort of like intricate plots. It's it is a thing. All right, we're gonna get this one out of the way for Herring the Kitty Man shanty. There once was a cat with a hungry belly. The name of the cat was Whiskers Jelly. His throat was dry, his bowl was bare. Meow me furry cats meow. Soon may the kitty man come with birds and mice and some tasty nums. One day when the critters come, we'll eat till our bellies are full. Well, Jelly got his boys, and they gathered round. They scattered seeds from the sack they found, in hopes the seeds they spread on the ground would bring small critters a boot. Are the Trailer Park Boys Canadian? That would make so much sense. Soon may the kitty man come with birds and mice and some tasty nums. One day when the critters come, we'll eat till our bellies are full. Well, the gang was bored and morale had dipped till one of the seeds grew green catnip. They sniffed and they snacked and they all got ripped. They all had a meow that night. Soon may the kitty man come to bring with mice and birds and some tasty nums. One day when the critters come, we'll eat till our bellies are full. Well, their heads were hung and the morn was nigh. The nip was strong and they all got high. Their bellies were shrunk and their bowls still dry. Oh, bring us some mice today. Soon may the kitty man come with birds and mice and some tasty nums. One day when the critters come, we'll eat till our bellies are full. Yeah. Trailer Park Boys are indeed Canadian. That makes so much sense. But yeah, that's a song about getting high. All right. What were we gonna do next? We were gonna do the Irish pub song next. Excuse me. Well, you're walking through the city street. You could be in Peru when you hear a distant calling and you know it's meant for you. Then you drop what you're doing and you join the merry mob. And before you know just where you are, you're in an Irish pub. They got one in Honolulu, they got one in Moscow too. They got 4 of them in Sydney and a couple in Kathmandu. Whether you sing or pull a pint, you'll always have a job, 'cause wherever you go around the world you find an Irish pub. Now, the design is fairly simple, and it usually works the same. You'll have Razor Houghton scoring in the Ireland-England game, and you know you're in an Irish pub the minute you're in the door, for a couple of boys with borders will be murdering Christy Moore. They got one in Honolulu, they got one in Moscow too. They got 4 of them in Sydney and a couple in Kathmandu. So whether you sing or pull a pint, you'll always have a job, 'cause wherever you go around the world you find an Irish pub. Now the owner is Norwegian, and the manager comes from Cork, and the lad who's holding up the bar say only age is work. He was born and bred in Bolton, but his mammy's from Kildare, and he's going to make his fortune soon and move to County Clare. They got one in Honolulu, they got one in Moscow too. They got 4 of them in Sydney and a couple in Kathmandu. So whether you sing or pull a pint, You'll always have a job, 'cause wherever you go around the world, you'll find an Irish pub. Now it's time for me to go, I have to catch me train. So I'll leave you sitting at the bar and face the wind and rain, for I'll have that pint you owe me, if I'm not gone on the dry, when we meet next week in Frankfurt in the fields of Athenry. They got one in Honolulu, they've got one in Moscow too. They got 4 of them in Sydney and a couple in Kathmandu. So whether you sing or pull a pint, you'll always have a job, 'cause wherever you go around the world, you find an Irish pub. They got one in Honolulu, they've got one in Moscow too. They got 4 of them in Sydney and a couple in Kathmandu. So whether you sing or pull a pint, you'll always have a job, 'cause wherever you go around the world, you find an Irish pub. Oh, wherever you go around the world, you find an Irish pub. Thank you for the song, my friends. Absolutely lovely. And now we shall do Red is the Rose. Oh, thank you, Songbird. I appreciate you. And you're welcome, Herring. To be fair, my Void, my cat, freaking loves getting ripped on. Fair enough. I am curious, what is your favorite song to sing? My favorite song to sing is probably, I like Red is the Rose. I like Red is the Rose a lot. Red is the Rose was one of my mother's favorite songs. I like Leave Her Johnny. I like One More Pull. And I really like Paddy's Green Shamrock Shore. Paddy's Green Shamrock Shore is one of my favorite songs to sing. There are also a couple of Irish songs that I'm not as good at singing now as I used to be when I was younger. But the lady and I are working on a few songs that are in Gaeilge that we want to sing for you guys. But she has to learn the cadence properly, and I have to relearn the cadence properly. So we're both going back through and sharpening up our Irish so we can sing them for you. Oh, I love Danny Boy. The short and the long version of Danny Boy are both fun to sing. They're more fun when you've got a bunch of people. Like, there are some songs that are fun with like a crowd, like Rattlin' Bog and Danny Boy and Drunken Sailor. Like, those are more fun when you got a bunch of people around. Any chance of karaoke versions of your favorite songs? Possibly, Songbird. I don't see why not. All right, we're going to do the High Kings version of Red is the Rose, because that's my favorite version. All right, here we go. Come over the hills, my bonny Irish lass. Come over the hills to your darling. You choose the road, love, and I'll make the vow, and I'll be your true love forever. Red is the rose that in yonder garden grows. Fair is the lily of the valley. Clear is the water that flows from the Boyne. But my love is fairer than any. 'Twas down my Killarney's green woods that we strayed, when the moon and the stars, they were shining. The moon, it shone its rays on her locks of golden hair, and she swore she'd be my love forever. Red is the rose that in yonder garden grows. Fair is the lily of the valley. Clear is the water that flows from the Boyne. but my love is fairer than any. It's not for the parting that my sister pains. Bless you, my love. It's not for the grief of my mother. It's all for the loss of my bonny Irish lass, that my heart is breaking forever. Red is the rose that in yonder garden grows, fair is the lily of the valley, clear is the water that flows from the Boyne, but my love is fairer than any. Red is the rose that in yonder garden grows, fair is the lily of the valley, clear is the water that flows from the Boyne, but my love is fairer than any. Oh, my love is fairer than any. Yeah, I love Red is the Rose. Red is the Rose is one of the best, and it's an old Irish song. I love it. Okay, the next one is novel. I like this one. So this is actually a Tolkien song. And I like it a lot. This is one of my favorites. I think this was first sung by Calamvi de Profundis, but it is a tavern song. It's a Tolkien song, I mean. Lever Johnny is a good one. I've never heard of the others, I don't think. Lever Johnny is a spectacular one. It's more religious, so I don't expect it on this channel, but do you, by any chance, know Let There Be Peace on Earth? I think so. And I love traditional Lutheran church hymns, Herring. Traditional church hymns, especially ones like Amazing Grace. I love psalms and hymns. They're so good. Like you will get very little music that is more soulful than like Lutheran or non-traditional Catholics. Sorry guys, I'm likely to miss the tail end of the stream. My sister is called. That's all right, Bear. I'm actually ending up right now. I'm gonna let everybody go to bed early tonight. So you're all good, brother. Take care of what you got to take care of. We got one more song and then we're done for the night. So this is a song from Tolkien called I Sit Beside the Fire and Think. I sit beside the fire and think of all that I have seen, of meadow flowers and butterflies in summers that have been, of yellow leaves and gossamer in autumns that there were, with morning mist and silver sun and wind upon my hair. I sit beside the fire and think of how the world will be when winter comes without a spring that I shall ever see. For still there are so many things that I have never seen In every wood, in every spring, there is a different green. I sit beside the fire and think of people long ago, and people who will see a world that I shall never know. But all the while I sit and think of times there were before. I listen for returning feet and voices at the door. I love this song. My violin teacher for 10 of the 16 years I took lessons was a nun, and she taught it to me. Song with Danny Boy and other Irish songs and jigs. Yeah, I mean, a lot of those old hymns and so are just I love them. I really love them. All right, my friends, I think that is going to be it for the evening. Okay, we're gonna snooze. I'm gonna send you all off to we're gonna drop you all off with somebody else if you're over on the Twitch portal. Oh, I love this song so very much. It's so beautiful. It's one of my favorites of your renditions. That and Okanash and Thorn, of course. Well, thank you, Crow. I appreciate that. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad whenever you guys get joy in the tavern, it brings the lady and I a great amount of satisfaction. Take a look into Charles Wethy, Methodist hymn writer. The name rings a bell, Songbird. I'll have to give it a look, though, because I don't remember off the top of my head. Darth Nexus, thank you, my friend. Have yourself a wonderful night, brother. Thank you, Jacob. Some of the old Anglican hymns sound just heavenly. I agree. Much love, Jacob. Crow, good night. And to all who joined us this fine evening, thank you, my friends. Always lovely to have you in the tavern. Thank you so much for all of the love tonight and for everyone who tipped the tavern keeper. Tyson, guten Nacht, mein Freundin. Haben Sie einen wunderbare Nacht. And have a good day tomorrow. Good night, Matty. Herring, it's always lovely to see you. Good night, my friends. While it is sad that we are parting, we will gather again the next time that you all seek a story. So until then, I will bid you all stay bloodthirsty, and I will see you next time. Good night, my friends.
The fire smokes black when she walks through the door. A shadow that stretches across the stone floor. She carries the staff, she carries the sight, a piece of the morning in the heart of the night. Satan, 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 Satan.
The staff hits the wood where the kings used to stand. Fate is a needle in a trembling hand. You asked for the rune, you asked for the flame, but you're too weak to carry the weight of your name.
Allah, the thread is unweaving. Allah, the truth is bereaving. The vulva is spinning, the spirit and bone. The seeds of your ending have already been sown. She sees the high hall, she sees it in ash, the glint of the gold, the sting of the lash. She speaks to the dead, she drinks from the well. There are secrets the living are too frightened to tell.